Alrighty, so I can't believe this is now kind of becoming an annual tradition, even though I know in the future it's probably not going to be the case because I'm pretty sure MLS is eventually going to stop its rapid ascent into the expansion world that we've been getting every single year. But at last, right now, a new year, a new team coming into MLS, which means a new team gets to be participating in the expansion draft, and this year it's St. Louis City SC, the one that participate in the expansion draft. And for those of you that don't know how the expansion draft work, well, basically, the new boys that is St. Louis City SC get to pick 5 player from the 23 out of 28 teams that are players that left on the unprotected list. And the reason why I say 23 out of 28 is that there are 5 teams actually is immune from this expansion draft, and these 5 teams are teams that have players that was picked in the last expansion draft. But what's interesting about this expansion draft, and that when I look at the result out of, there was definitely some surprises. And I think when you look at all 5 of these pick, I think maybe only one of them, some people saw it coming, because I know some people, of course, have done mock draft and they look at all the players that have left unprotected, that there were definitely some good ones that St. Louis City could have easily chose. But alas, it seems like most of the picks that they have are either safe picks or just picks that they're using for depth reason, or maybe for youth development, or the fact that they just love to pick players from the Eastern Conference, because I think this is the first time we actually have an expansion draft where the expansion team decided to pick every single player out of the Eastern Conference. And also, with this expansion draft, we know there's going to be trade, which that's why I did not do this video right after the expansion draft resort happened, because I knew there was going to be some trade. Though, that being said, there wasn't as much trade as what we saw in last year's expansion draft with Charlotte FC, but there was definitely one interesting one, and then also a notable trade that happened right after when the expansion draft is over. So, with that being said, let us actually go over in terms of the 5 players and also the notable trade that St. Louis City immediately made right after the expansion draft is over. And we start off with the number 1 pick in the St. Louis City expansion draft, and it's Nicholas Gioacchini from Orlando City that they pick as the first pick. Now, as I said before, out of all these picks, pretty much almost all of them tends to be a big surprise, and one that not many people thought that was going to be a player that St. Louis was going to pick. Though I think the only player you could say has to be Nicholas Gioacchini, because there were definitely hints that maybe they were going to get him. I mean, I really think he really never got a chance with Orlando City. I mean, I thought he was going to be a guy that, a U.S. international guy that have played a couple years in the second division of league in the French league, and that I thought coming into Orlando maybe he was going to get more shot, but it seems like he kind of had problem in terms of making into the roster, and there's definitely some potential that he can definitely do some good thing for this St. Louis team. So yeah, this was definitely one that is not a big surprise that St. Louis City decided to select. And also, it's almost kind of given the fact that has to be an Orlando City player being selected in the expansion draft, because besides last year expansion draft, it feels like we have seen a lot of Orlando City player has been selected in the expansion draft. I mean, I remember besides last year, wasn't Kamal Miller was selected in the expansion draft not long ago, and I think it was Nashville that of course picked him up, but then they of course traded him to Montreal, which I'm pretty sure Nashville of course would be regret. Or actually I'm not actually that's not the right expansion. I'm talking about Austin FC, the one that of course was going to get Kamal Miller, and they of course got him in one of the expansion draft, and then eventually traded him to Montreal. And I'm pretty sure Austin maybe is regretting that trade, because they probably could have had a Kamal Miller in their defense, consider their defense has been a little bit leaky in the last 2 seasons. But going back to this again, and I think this is a good pick for St. Louis, and we'll see whether if he is going to get some minutes. I mean, one of the interesting thing about expansion draft, and I'll probably make a video about this, looking at the past 5 teams that is in the expansion draft, of how their career end up to be. I mean, we usually don't see every player on the expansion draft turns out to be a big hit for their expansion team, but there are definitely players that sometimes will get minutes, especially in the beginning when a team is still trying to see how life in MLS is going to be, and trying to get the tactics right in the first season. Now, in the second pick, they decided to go with Indiana Vasilev from Inter Miami. Now, this is kind of interesting with the way that I think Indiana Vasilev, he was out of, or his loan spell with Inter Miami was going to come to an end. And I'm kind of interested to see that with him going to St. Louis City, does that mean his loan would be extended to another couple of months? Because I'm not sure exactly that, of course, is how it works. I mean, I'm not sure if Aston Villa is going to accept that as a thing, because that would be kind of awkward. The fact that, oh, his loan is over and you still picked him. No, he's not allowed to go to St. Louis because Aston Villa has the rights to, of course, get him back. But, I'm assuming maybe his loan is basically extended. And again, I think this is a decent pick with the way that, Vasilev during his time with Inter Miami, especially come off the bench, he was a really good super sub. He's always a guy that is known for scoring some late heroic goal, and I think that's kind of a guy that maybe St. Louis can bring off the bench and can definitely create some big moment. But yeah, we'll see whether or not, again, it's kind of interesting the fact that his loan spell comes to an end and he still get picked up in the expansion draft, and that whether if his loan is going to be extended, or maybe Aston Villa and St. Louis City might have had some discussion of the fact that, well, if we're going to pick him up in the expansion draft, then do you promise that you, of course, will extend his loan? Because if not, this wouldn't make sense of him decide to be the second pick of this expansion draft. Now we get to the third pick, and in the third pick, they decided to go with Jonathan Bell from the New England Revolution. Now, John Bell, for a long time, I definitely where he was with the Revs, and that I thought not only the fact that he was a good utility piece on the defensive front, but for a while that I thought he had some potential, especially during that Supporter Shield winning season. He was definitely an absolute beast and a guy that could definitely get some starting minutes. Now, obviously, in his second year, that has not kind of gone out to plan, and it feels like he's kind of suffer a bit of a sophomore slump. So it's going to be interesting to see whether if he can recover himself during his time with St. Louis, and that, again, he's another guy that is kind of young and definitely had some potential. That's kind of the theme with this draft, with the way that a lot of these players are still relatively young, and guys that St. Louis can definitely develop and kind of played up to the potential that they might have, that many would say. But yeah, I think this is a decent signing, and then again, we'll see whether or not if he is going to be a guy that's going to be a regular starter. I mean, last year, I remember when Charlotte decided to pick Joseph Mora, I thought he was going to be a starter alongside with Anton Walkes, and that kind of didn't turn out to be the case. So we'll see whether if this is going to be the case. And I know there are also some people said that maybe they should have picked Zach McGraw instead of John Bell in this situation. And, in some extent, I think that's a good case because, Zach McGraw, I think you could say that maybe he has definitely more upside than what John Bell has. But nevertheless, I don't think this is a bad pick from St. Louis, and that, again, we'll see whether or not if he is going to get some regular minutes. Now, another guy that, St. Louis, of course, picked coming out of the back line is John Nelson from FC Cincinnati. Now, this also is a very interesting pick because, John Nelson, he did definitely get some minutes with FC Cincinnati, definitely got more than during his time with FC Dallas. But one of the things that, is a big question with John Nelson is the fact that, he's a good fullback in terms of on the defensive shape. But when you're trying to ask him to go up forward and maybe push up forward, like what we see nowadays in the modern world of football, where fullbacks definitely are more pushing high up depending on the system it's run, then that could be a problem because John Nelson is not one of those fullbacks that like to go forward and bomb forward to join the attack. And again, depending on the system that St. Louis does and depending on the system that Bradley Carnell decided to use, maybe this might be a pick that, we'll see whether or not if it, of course, will work out. Because if Bradley Carnell is going to use a system where he relies on his fullbacks, then this move kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, I get it. You need to, of course, find yourself a fullback because, getting a fullback, especially getting a left back in MLS, is not very easy. But I feel like there could have been a better option than John Nelson. Though, that being said, he's definitely a guy that I think could crack to the starting 11. And again, he's also a guy that he's looking for more opportunity to get starting minutes, because we know that he also have some good potential to be a decent player. I mean, anytime when a player coming out of the FC Dallas Academy, you know that they have a good potential to be very decent, and we'll see whether or not if that's going to be continued to be the case with John Nelson. Now we get to the last pick of the expansion draft, and they decided to get Jake LaCava from the New York Red Bulls. Now, out of all these players on this list, I think this was the one that I was just simply saying, wait, who's that? Because, you know, out of all these players, I know if you're not kind of like just a die-hard MLS fans and keep track of news, you probably might not recognize some of them. But even with me keeping track of MLS most of the time, I couldn't recognize this name. And it turns out that he was a guy that comes out of the Red Bulls Academy, and he's been spending time not only with Red Bulls too, but also in the USL Championship, most recently with Tampa Bay Rowdies. Now, this was also the pick that they, of course, decided to trade away, and they decided to trade him to Inter Miami for up to $250,000 general allocation money, which is a decent amount of money that St. Louis City, of course, would get. But one thing that I kind of is a little bit head scratch about this, and that I feel like if they were going to go for a Red Bulls player from the expansion draft, they should have picked Patrick Klimala. I mean, I really think they should have picked him, especially, I think he was actually left unprotected, and that if they would have picked Patrick Klimala, I mean, I know they probably won't keep him, because if they want to keep him, they're going to have to make him a designated player, which I'm pretty sure St. Louis City is not going to do that. But a good way to do it is try to flip him for maybe a lot of money, because, you know, while Patrick Klimala could be a player that you know, I know Red Bulls fans will say that he can be a very frustrating player to watch, he still definitely has that talent to do well in MLS. And that, again, if they would have picked him instead of this guy called Jake LaCava, they would have got a lot more general allocation money. But that being said, I think when you look at the lack of trade and just like one trade that happened in this for St. Louis City SC, getting general allocation money was never the goal. This is not what we saw like last year with Charlotte FC decided to pack up on those general allocation money, or any other team that we've seen recently decided to really flip those players and decide to get those sweet Gabber buck. And that, yeah, you know, again, you know, this is gonna be interesting to see out of all these picks whether or not if any of them, of course, would work out. Now, one notable trade that did happen that's not related to the expansion draft but happened right after it is St. Louis decided to acquire Tim Parker from the Houston Dynamo in exchange for $500,000 general allocation money. Now, I know there's also some people who are saying, wait, why couldn't they just get Tim Parker from the expansion draft? Like, he was left unprotected for the Houston Dynamo. Well, I think the reason why they decided not to is that they didn't want to eat up his contract. So it was pretty clear that the Dynamo, they had to get rid of Tim Parker. Like, the contract that he was sitting, and especially with the way that he definitely had a huge downfall during his time ever since he's joined with the Houston Dynamo, they had to get out of that cap hit. And I think the reason why maybe St. Louis decided to not choose him is the fact that if they decide to choose him, then they basically had to eat up all that contract that the Dynamo, of course, had. Now, of course, with him traded to there, I think I've heard that they still had to pay half of the contract that Tim Parker, of course, owned, that is the Houston Dynamo, and St. Louis, of course, would pay the other half. But the fact that they were able to get some money out of Tim Parker instead of maybe just kind of release him and have to eat up his contract, that is nothing short of a miracle, because, again, this was a very big liability for the Dynamo with the contract that he is sitting on. And, again, it's also going to be interesting to see how Tim Parker is going to do, because, again, I think maybe the reason why Tim Parker didn't work out for the Dynamo is that he really never had a reliable center back partners. Like, during his time with the New York Red Bulls, he had a trusted partner in Eric Long, and I know that partnership with Long and Parker were considered one of the best center back partnership we've seen in the league. But ever since he, of course, is no longer partner with Long and gone to the Dynamo, and knowing the fact that the Dynamo is a team that, again, I kind of find it weird the fact that Tim Parker decided to go to the Dynamo, because this was another guy like Aaron Long. He could have easily be a guy that has vision of potentially going to Europe, but instead he kind of took a step back and decided to join a team that is clearly in a rebuilding mode, and that, yeah, again, just with the way that he was pretty much asked to just kind of hold up the back line in sync, which that's probably not his biggest strength. It's no surprise that he kind of floundered with the Houston Dynamo. But again, for the Dynamo, it is kind of a bit of a miracle, the fact that they at least got something out of him, and that yeah, you know, we'll see whether or not if Tim Parker can revitalize his career with St. Louis, and especially I think if he wants to revitalize his career, he needs to have a good center back partners, because if he does not have that with St. Louis, I don't think it's going to work out. But that being said, another thing I will say about St. Louis with this signing is that this feels like a signing that we've seen with a lot of expansion team have done, which is they love to always pick up some veteran presence, whether it's within MLS or within other leagues, to really man the back line. I mean, we saw it with Charlotte FC, decided to get Christian Fuchs, and then we saw it with Austin FC getting Alex Ring in that central defensive mid, a proven commodity there. And we even see it with some of the other expansion team like Nashville getting the likes of Walker Zimmerman at the back line. And I think St. Louis probably saw that, well, we definitely need to have a guy that is proven to be a decent presence in MLS on the defensive front. And, you know, while Tim Parker definitely was not that kind during his time with the Dynamo, again, we'll see whether this change of scenery and him getting a reliable center back partners will maybe get his career back on track like he has during his time with the New York Red Bulls. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of my reaction with the expansion draft, and also to talk about the Tim Parker trade that happened right after this draft. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think of this? Do you think St. Louis make the right move in terms of some of these expansion draft? I mean, I know as we continue in the next couple of months, and especially after the World Cup, we're going to see St. Louis start to sign more players. I mean, right now, I think with the amount of players that they have signed, I feel like they're in a good shape. I mean, if they can add a couple of more pieces, then they'll definitely be in better shape than what Charlotte was last year, considered with Charlotte just almost at a point where they looked like they were just completely unprepared heading into their expansion season. But the projectile that St. Louis is heading, I think, and they're definitely in the right timeline, and that I think in a couple of month times we're going to definitely see some big trades that is going to happen. And not to mention, we're already seeing them start to trade some international roster spot for general allocation money. Something tells me they're definitely building something special, and that they could definitely trying to once again prove that, hey, teams that come as an expansion side, they could find themselves some success in MLS in the first season, whether, you know, if they are still going to be a respectable team, or they'll basically do what one of 7 MLS team has done in their expansion season, which is make the playoffs in the first year. But there you have it. Like I said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.